Many people say depression is nothing more than sadness, but is not. Robert Sapolsky says, "I think depression is absolutely a disease. I believe that it is as much of a biological disorder as is, say, diabetes." That is why I'm going to explain to you why depression is a mental illness. After reading many credible sources, I feel adequately prepared to try and help you see as well that depression is a serious mental illness. Depression affects a large number of people, young and old, so it is relevant as it is a major problem facing society. It is important to know that depression is more than just sadness. I will give you enough information about the reality of depression so that you can see for yourself what depression really is. According to the American Psychiatric Association, depression is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Depression makes people not be able to go about their everyday lives like everyone else. The medical stance on sadness is that it can be normal and is only an indicator of an underlying disease when feelings become excessive, all-consuming, and interfere with daily living. Sadness is only one small part or indicator of depression, as depression is much worse. Sometimes people with depression try to hide it, but having depression changes the way you live. It makes you into almost a completely different person. Mental illnesses affect how people live and even how they raise their children. Depression's no different. Depressed parents have been found to interact with their child in completely different ways that affect the child's development. Depressed mothers have been found in some studies to use less emotion, expressivity in their language with their babies, and they make less eye contact, says Megan Smith, a co-director of the Parenting Center at Yale. A depressed parent can isolate not only themselves, but their child as well. This can lead to a lifetime of difficulties for said child. They could have trouble connecting to people or society. While depression affects your day-to-day life, it all starts in your brain. Depression affects parts of the brain. While they've not pinpointed the exact place, they do know some areas that are affected. 3 parts of the brain have appeared to play a role in depression: the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus regulates the production of a hormone called cortisol. The body releases it when it is under stress, which means it releases it under times of depression. This can lead to a chemical imbalance where the long-term exposure of cortisol can slow the production of new neurons and cause memory problems. The long-term exposure can also cause the prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotions, to shrink. The amygdala facilitates emotional responses, but has become enlarged and more active due to constantly high levels of cortisol. Having an enlarged and very active amygdala, as well as abnormal activity in other parts of the brain, can cause a disturbance in sleep and activity patterns, as well as the release of other hormones and chemicals into the body. With these things happening in the brain, it can affect the healthiness of the brain overall as well. The shrinking of parts of the brain mentioned earlier makes the brain lose volume, which is associated with decrease of brain function in those areas. The enlargement of the amygdala can cause not only that area of the brain to be inflamed, but other parts as well, and it only gets worse as time passes without treatment. Having lack of oxygen in the brain due to inflammation of the brain has been linked to being more depressed as well. More oxygen has been proven to decrease depression. Simple sadness does not get better because oxygen. Depression is something that can be treated and affects people's daily lives in many ways, very similar to other mental illnesses. Depression is a mental illness for many reasons, but most importantly because it's like other mental disorders. It affects your everyday life and it affects your brain. I have explained why depression is a mental illness to help show you that it is not something controllable like simple sadness. I read and used many sources to adequately prepare myself to try and help you see that depression is a serious mental problem. Tons of people face depression every day only to be told they are just sad when they are in fact Depression is a major problem facing society, and it is important to know that it is a real mental illness. As I quoted Robert Sapolsky earlier, depression is a mental disease that is as much of a biological disorder as any other disorder, such as diabetes.